The Chinese use architecture a little differently than what we see in the West, and so let's look at some of their methods and materials, especially those that differ from what we might be used to. First of all, many of their homes are going to be built in a courtyard form, which I will get into later on. When you look at the overall form and the overall materials, generally they're building out of wood. Generally we see curved, sloped roof lines. You're going to see a ridge beam in many cases, which is this piece that runs along the top of the roof, oftentimes weighting it down. Sometimes those are architectural details that are no longer necessary. They are a holdover from using different roofing materials. So let's start by looking at basic architecture. Almost every building that we see is going to be built on a stone base to raise it up off the ground. This is necessary because this is all wood architecture. We will also see the use of purlins, which is a horizontal beam along the length of a roof, resting on a main rafter and supporting the common rafters or boards. So we see these intermediate beams here, and those are our purlin. In terms of general architecture, apart from the curved roof line and the extensive roof, which is to keep water off of the wooden construction underneath, of course, water and wood don't really mix in a good way. What you're going to see is basically post and lintel design. Here's our post and here's our lintel, the cross piece. So it's no different from what the Romans, the Greeks, and others were using. But because they're working in wood as opposed to stone, you have more beams, you have a slightly different construction, especially in that roof. Speaking of which, they tile their roofs a little bit differently. We tend to see two styles of roof in China. The more common form uses these shallow tiles, and what they do is they interlock. So you will have a gutter, and then you will have an upper piece that basically prevents any water getting between the gutter pieces, at the bottom of which you will generally have some kind of decorative element so that the water flows off. It misses the building, much like rain gutters in modern times, but serves an aesthetic purpose as well. In temples or more important buildings, oftentimes you'll see these round tiles, the same shallow roofing tiles in between, but now those upper pieces are going to become more decorative, and the end of them are frequently going to be decorated in some way. These are all ceramic, typically terracotta, but any form of ceramic will do. In terms of material, everything is going to be wood. Really, really common. It's what they have in the area. And when we're looking at wood construction, of course, wood doesn't hold the same weight as stone or concrete. So they need to have far more rafters, beams, and joints in their construction. They also don't use nails, so oftentimes these are mortise and tenon connections between, for example, the beams and the uprights. In terms of material, they also use Adobe, which is basically mud mixed with typically straw to give it some strength. This may be fired, but oftentimes it's not. And you're going to see that in more rural environments throughout China. You also see the use of stone and brick. Stone for massive architecture. And something like the Great Wall would actually be a mix of the two, where they're using stone in certain sections, brick in certain sections. Remember, the Great Wall is built over generations. So the change of materials is not surprising when you take into account the sheer time frame that it's taking up.